After a genuinely horrible sounding last few years, 2019 gave the Prince of Darkness a new lease on life after an unexpected collaboration with Post Malone. 2007 saw Ozzy Osbourne releasing a song entitled Not Going Away. However, after 2010's Scream, he did go away for a while. After 10 years, Ozzy Osbourne's back with Ordinary Man. So grab your axe and let's get into my review. Hello friendly people of the internet, if this is your first time here, be sure to subscribe to this channel for your regular dose of positivity on things a lot of people think suck. Now there was a lot of criticism over the move to include album producer Andrew Watt as the guitar player on this album over longtime guitarist Zakk Wylde. Ozzy has a history of working with some pretty talented guitar players who produce some of rock's most iconic riffs and guitar solos. So I challenged myself going into this album to not let comparison to other guitar players affect my review, and I think I might have been successful. I found the last few Ozzy albums to be very mediocre and just kind of generic sounding. Black Rain and Scream each had some really strong standout guitar performances, but a 30-second guitar solo means nothing on a 3-minute track full of... Now with Ordinary Man, I wasn't really expecting or hoping for another Mr. Crowley or Bark at the Moon, but I really wanted to be surprised and feel like this album's existence is justified. So let's get into my track breakdown. The album begins with a guest feature from Slash on Straight to Hell, which has a very generic modern rock sounding riff at the focus of the song, but the funk slide laid over the drum shots scream Tony Iommi, and I can't help but feel like this track was a deliberately awesome Black Sabbath callback. The lyrics here are typically Ozzy about just being bad and generally evil enough to make the listener scream and defecate, which is a word I don't really want to hear anyone sing ever. All My Life draws out nice melodic verses into an awesome snare slap that brings in a heavy ass chorus with a pretty interesting and complex sounding guitar riff, and the lead work on this track could have passed for a Zakk Wylde guitar solo, especially during the outro. Production wise, the reverby vocals and guitar tone bring me back to No More Tears or Fire in the Sky, two of my favorite Ozzy tracks of all time. This song was definitely my favorite on this album. While listening to the track Goodbye, I can't help but feel like Chad Smith, Duff, and Andrew Watt were having the time of their lives. These guys had to be Sabbath fans growing up, and this song wears its Sabbath influences most overtly out of all of the tracks on the album. We have that awesome funk slide again, and a really sludgy, weird time signature throughout, and a total change of tempo at the 2:17 mark. My only criticism here is that the whole vocal melody does feel a little stale and worn in, almost like a Black Sabbath song I've already heard, and the way Ozzy sings meh instead of me here really bothers me. Can't change me. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Is there any way you can make that less me and more meh? Can't change me. The title track, Ordinary Man, features Elton John, which sounds like a really bizarre team-up, but it results in a very classic yet fresh-sounding Ozzy ballad. In an interview, Ozzy mentioned the collaboration just came together while writing Ordinary Man. It reminded him of an old Elton song. He asked, and lo and behold, Elton John agreed and sings and plays piano on the song. Their vocals actually mesh surprisingly well, particularly when Elton John sings in his higher range, and we get this really melodic, soaring sounding guitar solo that we've come to expect from Ozzy ballads. And while it isn't quite comparable to what we've heard on other ballads, no, I promise, no comparisons. This was a strong performance overall that reaches a pretty beautiful climax, which is enhanced by a nice string choir arrangement and pretty awesome percussion dynamics. I really can't help but feel like this should have been the album closer. It's a very personal and reflective track that would have been an awesome swan song if this did happen to be Ozzy's last album. It kind of reminds me of what the song The Garden is to Rush now that Clockwork Angels is their final album. As a young guitarist, I remember wanting to learn classics like Diary of a Madman on acoustic guitar, and Under the Graveyard brought me back to those days and made me want to pick up a guitar and be all like, "It doesn't answer when I cry for help." As the first single from this album, there was a lot of fair criticism about the guitar work and the solo. There's this thing I used to do when I was 16 with my guitar when I wanted to show people just how good at guitar I was, because it's easy to play and it sounds cool to the untrained ear. The problem is a lot of people who are listening to Ozzy Osbourne are listening for blistering guitar work, which we did not get on this track. Lyrically, Ozzy tends to focus on being crazy or being insane, and we get more of that here. I haven't really found myself relating much to his lyrics. Having said that, with the state of things in 2020, I think people will be surprised by how relatable the lyrics are on this song and on this album overall. Which brings me to one of the most lyrically disturbing and jarring songs I think I have ever heard. Eat Me starts with harmonica intro, distorted bass riff, and I'm thinking, hey, this is gonna be another great Black Sabbath-esque track, and it kind of is. But when the lyrics start, they seem to be about literally eating Ozzy Osbourne. It's one thing to have the clever subtleties of a metaphor run throughout a song, but we're talking second helping. My meat is nice and tender. Take me for later. I have no expiration. The second half of the album is kind of a mixed bag. Today's the End has one of the most unique and powerful choruses I've heard from Ozzy. However, at times it feels very disjointed from the rest of the song, especially the instrumentation during the guitar solo, which makes this track feel unsure of whether it wants to be a rocker or a melodic ballad. Scary Little Green Men is an okay song that just isn't really super interesting overall. The chorus melody is memorable enough, and there's a really cool drum breakdown where Chad Smith really shines, but I was surprised to learn that Tom Morello was featured on guitar here. He wasn't very well utilized aside from the subtle whammy, but I guess we can't really have him going all on an Ozzy Osbourne album. Holy for Tonight is great lyrically, exploring the inevitability of death, but it's very lacking in dynamics and results in a somewhat boring listen overall. The guitar solo in this track gives it a pulse, but it really just isn't enough to make this a go-to listen for me. Which brings us to the proper album closer. It's a Raid was such a pleasant surprise. This song is literally a punk banger and is nothing like I've ever heard from Ozzy before. The post-feature works seamlessly, and the sheer amount of profanity and rudeness in this track is just awesome. There's even classic live Ozzy banter like "Louder" and "Go f***ing crazy" built right into the song. We get Take What You Want as a bonus track on the album, which is nice because it feels very out of place with the features being much more overt and less subtle than the rest of the ones throughout the album. It's a good enough song, but the modern production elements are a stark contrast to the Sabbath-esque vibe that's carried throughout the rest of the album. When Ozzy released Blizzard of Oz, there weren't many similarities to his Sabbath work, except perhaps lyrically. Musically, the focus seemed to be more about up-tempo, virtuoso guitar playing, so it's really nice to see an album come out that brings back the simplicity of some of the Black Sabbath tracks, while also incorporating what made Ozzy's solo work great. This was a really surprising album. I didn't know what I was expecting here, but I know what I wanted, and I think I got it. I mentioned my distaste for the last two albums we got, and I was really hoping this album was just the opposite of those in every way. And this album feels like a love letter to Ozzy's career. We get Sabbath sounds, awesome ballads, some neat experimentation, and there isn't really much that feels generic here. Everything feels like it belongs. Hardcore guitarists will likely take issue with the guitar work, which does feel like a step back when stacked up next to the guitar playing of Randy Rhoads or Jakey Lee or Zakk Wylde. But there are some really standout guitar moments, so I don't really see this being a super valid criticism. There are a few tracks that didn't really resonate with me, and one I'm quite certain I will never listen to ever again. This was a solid 3.5 out of 5 for me. What do you guys think? Did you take issue with the guitar playing? Did you dig the Sabbath elements as much as I did? Let me know in the comments.